You've got to win. That's the only thing I know.
At any cost?
At any cost.
Kill the other guy?
Why not? Get him out of the road. You'll never have to compete with him again.
There'd be somebody else come up in his place.
Well, take a shot at him, too.
In 1967, Canada celebrated its 100th birthday. For many Canadians, it was a time of hope. People were confident and looking ahead to a future even brighter than the past. From coast to coast to coast, people were brimming with optimism. And in Toronto, there was no reason to believe the Maple Leafs Stanley Cup victory that year would be their last.
Fantastic.
The Toronto Maple Leafs, a beloved and historic hockey franchise, continue to enjoy support of fans around the world, despite the fact that hockey's highest honor, the Stanley Cup, has eluded them for generations. But it wasn't always that way. It's hard to overstate just how good the Leafs once were.
The hockey capital of the world.
And how beloved they were.
We have the world's champions, the Maple Leafs.
But by the early 70s, a new boss took control of this storied franchise, and nothing would ever be the same.
Who told you that I interfered with the team? Never interfered with a team in my life.
Now there's all sorts of debris being thrown onto the ice.
I have to sit through an entire winter of this garbage with the Maple Leafs.
We haven't played very well. Matter of fact, we played lousy.
This team is never going to get any better.
Spring is the time of year the Leafs fall.
I honestly feel that I have never done anything that is wrong.
Why don't you like Harold Ballard?
Oh, because of what he had to say about women.
The Toronto Maple Leafs won in 1967. But since then, it's been no show for Harold and his boys.
He's interested only in making his money, and that's about it.
Harold Ballard may have turned Maple Leaf Gardens into the cash box on Carlton Street, but he did so at the expense of its greatest asset. Ballard turned the Leafs from perennial Cup favorites to perennial cellar dwellers. His meddling and combative behavior ruined the team for a generation and beyond.
Do I have one word to describe him?
Entertaining.
Blowhard, loudmouth,
Cantankerous.
Bombastic as hell.
destructive,
Entitled.
Misunderstood. Tough.
vindictive,
Interesting.
Buffoon. Enigma.
Harold Ballard, who came to own the Leafs and the Cathedral of Hockey at 60 Carlton Street in Toronto, was the custodian of a piece of Canadian history. A hockey club founded in 1917 as the Arenas and renamed the St. Pat's 2 years later. In 1927, the team was purchased and renamed the Maple Leafs by Toronto gravel baron Conn Smythe. And in 1931, he embarked on construction of Maple Leaf Gardens, a miracle of architecture that was finished in 5 short months. For years, the Leafs flourished and won under the tutelage of their proud owner. Conn Smythe was a winner in almost everything he touched, whether as a prosperous businessman, owner of thoroughbred horses, or as the man who made the Toronto Maple Leafs synonymous with success. His legacy was hard for anyone to follow, let alone Harold Ballard, whom Smythe once referred to as a pirate.
Conn Smythe, hero of 2 wars, the guy who built the Gardens in the Depression, guy who won all those Stanley Cups.
The Smythe name is on the Stanley Cup 11 times. Nobody else is going to meet that boy.
Connie was the type of person who could be very, very tough. He was not an admirer of Harold and made that clear.
No one saw Harold Edwin Ballard as the natural successor to Conn Smythe except Harold himself. Since the day he was born in Toronto, July 30th, 1903, he was an ambitious, restless, free spirit who learned the business world at his father's knee. Sidney Eustace Ballard was a successful manufacturer of sewing machines and ice skates, and before long, his son Hal had dropped out of Upper Canada College, eventually opening up a manufacturing business of his own, and invented a machine to cut hot dog rolls for Shopsy's Delicatessen, a Toronto landmark. But Harold Ballard was never cut out to just be successful. He needed excitement.
He starts out life as a rich man's son. He doesn't have a care in the world. He was too young for World War I. He's too old for World War II. During the Great Depression, he had a playboy lifestyle. He danced the night away. You know, he never had a worry in his life.
Among other passions, Ballard raced miniature speedboats known as sea fleas and was even the flag bearer for Canada's 1928 Winter Olympic team. In 1930, Ballard was the manager and coach of a minor league hockey team named the National Sea Fleas. And by 1940, Ballard found success as the president of the Toronto Marlboros, the Maple Leafs Farm Club, where he would forge a lifelong bond with Con's son, Stafford Smythe. In 1957, an aging Conn Smythe turned over control of his beloved hockey team and building to a 7-person committee headed by his son Stafford, known as the Silver Seven. Newspaper owner John Bassett was also a member of the committee, and despite Con's disapproval, they were soon joined by Ballard, who was appointed to fill a vacancy.
I think there were originally 7 owners because they were called the Silver Seven, but it really became a 3-man operation with Bassett, Ballard, and Smythe.
We used to quake in our boots with John Bassett. He was always a stern kind of guy, or had this image of that. And Stafford was another guy that seemed like a stern guy, and Harold was more the fun-loving guy. They all tolerated each other to be part of this troika that took over from Conn Smythe.
The Bassetts were the elite of Toronto, and the Smythes weren't far behind. And Harold Ballard wasn't very high on that list. He had been the 3rd fiddle, the 7th fiddle for a lot of years at that point. And I think he wanted to prove that he could do the job, that he could get it all done.
Executive Vice President, Harold Ballard. How are you, Harold? I'm all right. Feel good? Oh, couldn't feel better, believe me.
That group ushered in a kind of a renewed era of success in Leaf hockey. When you look at what happened in, the 3 consecutive cups between 62 and 64, and then after a couple years, failing in the playoffs, then winning again in 67. He was a part of that.
Well, he was around for 4 Stanley Cups, so they're not all bad. I mean, he was still a part owner, remember, in the good years. He loved seeing his team win. I was there when they won in the 3 Stanley Cups in a row, and there was nobody happier than Harold.
This is our centennial year, and we have our centennial project finished.
You got it, eh?
Yes, sir.
This is the one you want.
Something. And I want to thank the supporters of the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I want to sympathize with our opponents.
The final score of tonight's game, Toronto Maple Leafs 3, the Montreal Canadiens 1.
Being there as a kid at that parade and seeing the Leafs come out one by one and seeing Terry Sawchuk and Dave Keon and all the players wave and all that kind of stuff was something that I hope that the future and the current generation of Leafs fans and the ones that are old enough to remember the championship in '67 experience again.
When I think of the Maple Leafs, I think of my grandfather. My grandfather immigrated to Canada in 1967. Last year, the Leafs won the Cup. Leafs win, praise of the city. He went to the parade. And it really showed him that, yeah, as much as I may feel different from many of the people in this new country, I am more alike than I am different. And he's been a diehard Leafs fan ever since.
Although Ballard wasn't a huge factor in the team's cup wins in the 60s, he definitely made himself useful at Maple Leaf Gardens. His main job, and true passion, was to keep Maple Leaf Gardens full, and it was a job he was born to do. By 1969, profits had tripled to just under $1 million.
He was not a great hockey man by any stretch. He really was at his best in the 60s as a promoter. I mean, he brought Muhammad Ali the fight. Conn Smythe didn't want the black draft dodger in Toronto.
There's one hell of a lot of difference in fighting in the ring and going to war in Vietnam.
You know, and it's what caused Conn Smythe to give up his directorship was when Muhammad Ali could not find a fight in the United States, they looked to Canada.
Conn Smythe, he was the one that said, I'm off the board if you're bringing in Cassius Clay. He did not like what happened when they let Cassius Clay fight George Chuvalo in the Gardens. He didn't like a lot of things that Ballard did.
Conn Smythe, in protest, sells his remaining 5,100 shares of Maple Leaf Gardens Limited and resigns from the board.
You think of Muhammad Ali, not allowed to box, but there is a time he was able to get out of the country, and Harold Ballard facilitated that.
People here in Canada are nice, and it's a lot different from where I come from.
With Conn Smythe completely out of the picture, there wasn't much to constrain Harold Ballard. First on the agenda, removing the portrait of Queen Elizabeth to install more seats.
When the mezzanines came in, the Queen was up there, but he didn't even think about that. But of course, he threw the great quip out, she doesn't pay admission, so why am I letting her in the game? So everybody went on that. What he was doing was taking this building that had been overbuilt. I mean, the building was really, really well constructed. He shrunk the seats to get more people in. You know, if there was money to be made, he didn't care who played Maple Leaf Gardens. You know, I mean, it was not a closed shop for anyone or no one. There was money to be made on a Muhammad Ali fight. I don't think he did it because he had great moral compass or anything like that. It was like, wow, this is great. I mean, the Beatles, famous, you know, supposedly that urban legend, myth.
He sold a second show without a contract. So he had the Beatles down for 2 shows, and Brian Epstein, the manager, fortuitously agreed to play a second show, like 4 hours later.
I heard the story about when the Beatles came over, they did a concert at the Gardens, and it was in the summer.
Folklore goes that Ballard turned off the air conditioning, which didn't exist.
He delayed the concert by an hour and a half, turned the heat on the building, and turned the water off.
Where is a water fountain in Maple Leaf Gardens? I wouldn't take a drink from one. I don't even know where one was.
So people had to go to the concessions to get something to drink, and it was probably 110 degrees in the building at that point. So, I mean, from that standpoint, things like that, yeah, that was crazy like a fox.
He loved that. He was like decades later, he loved that. Like this, that was his reputation, that he was such a promoter, that he did all these kind of things, like his business savviness.
I remember once when Billy Joel was playing and he was doing his sound check. Billy Joel, I guess, can be quite irascible too, right? And he sort of accosts Mr. Ballard, says something like, you know, hey, what are you doing in here, buddy, or something? And Mr. Ballard turns to him and says, I own the fucking building. And Billy Joel goes, okay, great. You know, that's a pretty solid answer back then. I own it. In a time when there was no other venue except the CNE that hosted over 5,000 people in Toronto. You know, if you were Springsteen and you weren't playing the CNE in August, you had to play us.
For all his rough edges, Ballard did have someone that kept him grounded. His beloved wife, Dorothy, the dignified daughter of a preacher who patiently endured her husband's antics for 45 years. Dorothy's passing in 1969 due to cancer forever left a vacancy in Ballard's life.
Harold Ballard losing his wife, Dorothy, in 1969 was a huge turning point in his life. She meant everything to him. And from the people that I spoke to, as I got to know Harold Ballard along the way, they told me that he was a different persona while she was alive.
I think it had a massive impact on him. I think you choose a life partner, and when that partner's gone, life changes. I think that shadow hung over him. But I think any man at that age has known grief, has known loss. He was a human being. He wasn't entirely a clown.
When his wife left us, he kind of became, I know, more inward and more an executive. And he thought being an executive was to have everybody afraid of him. If you relate to today's world like Trump does, you know, everybody's scared of him. Everybody's scared of him. And that doesn't make a great executive.
He certainly looked after his wife every day of his life. You know, he took flowers there every day.
While in mourning, things got worse when law enforcement became aware that money was being skimmed from the cash box on Carlton. An RCMP raid at Maple Leaf Gardens led to a long investigation. The result was Stafford Smythe charged with income tax evasion and accused, along with Ballard, of illegally taking money from Maple Leaf Gardens to pay for home renovations and other personal expenses.
There was something to the effect it was a public company and they'd appropriated money from the company.
June 1969, John Bassett, chairman of the board, held a vote to decide if Staff Smythe and Harold Ballard, despite neither yet being convicted of anything, should be removed from their posts as president and executive vice president. The board voted 8-7 to oust Ballard and Smythe, with Bassett casting the deciding vote. Strangely, in a strategic blunder that would haunt Bassett for years to come, he allowed Smythe and Ballard to hold on to their shares and remain on the board.
I think Bassett was in a position that he couldn't win. He was a head of a major television network and also a member of the board of Maple Leaf Gardens. He felt in conscience that he should force the resignation of Smythe and Ballard. Ballard never forgave him. And the first opportunity he had, you're out of here, gone, period, no debate.
He's a great glad-hander, and, goes around with that ivory smile. He looks like a Pepsodent smile, and he tries to win you over with all that. But when you know Bassett, and know him the way I know him, it's a different story.
A mere 18 months later, at the organization's annual meeting, Smythe and Ballard exacted their revenge. As the two largest shareholders, Ballard and Smythe managed to persuade the other shareholders to support them. They regained control of the board, reinstalling themselves as president and executive vice president. Now in an untenable situation, Bassett and his loyalists resigned. September 1st, 1971, he sold his shares to Ballard and Smythe for almost $6 million. Ballard and Smythe had achieved their dream, complete control of the Toronto Maple Leafs, but they had no control of their destiny because it was time to go to trial. But Stafford never made it to the stand. He died unexpectedly from complications due to a bleeding ulcer, a mere 12 days before the trial. Only 50 years old, he had told anyone who'd listen that he would never go to jail. And he was correct.
Stafford Smythe predeceases Ballard quite suddenly.
When they got rid of Bassett and Stafford died, then it became for Harold Ballard to take over and get rid of the Smythes altogether. He wanted to make it his team.
A 68-year-old Ballard bought his shares, giving him a 71% controlling interest in the building and the team. He then installed himself as president and chairman of Maple Leaf Gardens Limited.
I think there was a second childhood element to it, like, oh my God, the Toronto Maple Leafs fell in my lap. And you know what? I'm going to have fun, and I'm going to take it and run with it, and I'm going to be a somebody, and people are going to know that I own the Toronto Maple Leafs.
To buy Bassett and Smythe's shares, Ballard went nearly $14 million in debt. He may have told the world he owned the Toronto Maple Leafs, but fact was, the banks did.
He owns this much of the Maple Leaf Gardens Limited, Ballard does, and he's got a chance to buy this much, okay? So Don Giffen, who became later on a prominent director, takes him to the TD Bank and arranges a loan for this much. So he's in over his head like somebody that's bought a house, way beyond their means.
1972 was an eventful year in hockey, with the NHL's continued expansion to 16 teams and the emergence of a rival league, the World Hockey Association. Life was difficult for Harold Ballard, who was guilty of having a bad hockey team and guilty in a court of law.
Mr. Ballard, what are your thoughts now that the trial is finally over and you've been found guilty?
I don't feel guilty. But however, Judge Damon considers that I am guilty. And it's entirely up to him. I've never given a jail sentence any thought. It's the furthest from my mind. But however, if there's a jail sentence, it's a jail sentence, let's face it.
Ballard's prison sentencing conflicted with the upcoming Summit Series. For the first time, the best professional players from hockey's two superpowers, Canada and the USSR, went head-to-head. Proud Canadian that he was, Ballard let Team Canada train at Maple Leaf Gardens. Together with agent/union boss Alan Eagleson, he bought the ad rights to the 8-game event and raked in millions.
Now, what are your plans in terms of the Russia-Canada hockey series?
I would like, if it was possible, if it was any way that they could extend their decision until after the series was over, well, I'd be very grateful, because I've spent a tremendous amount of time on Hockey Canada since its conception.
Ballard got his wish. His sentencing was delayed until after the Summit Series, infuriating his critics. And he was in Moscow to witness possibly the most famous goal in Canadian hockey history. But for Ballard, national pride quickly turned to personal embarrassment. Upon his return from the Soviet Union, justice was served. In October 1972, he entered Millhaven Penitentiary to serve a 3-year sentence after being convicted of 47 white-collar crimes.
I don't actually recall the first time I met him because, unfortunately, when I first signed my first contract, Harold was in jail at that time.
When he was sentenced to prison, I think he was shocked. I didn't think he felt he would go because he was this, big, important guy in sports and owner of the Toronto Maple Leafs. How could they do this to him? But he went and spent about a year in Millhaven.
The time in prison, he decided that bleep you, people can say you're a con, you can whatever. I'm going to have fun about it, okay? And all the shots at me, I'm going to fire them back.
He says, hey, Darryl, I want to show you what our Canadian prisons are. And he's got a stack of pictures on his desk, and he hands them to me, right? And I start going through them, and it's Harold in the guard's uniform with his feet up on the desk, got a bottle of beer, a cigar, and color TV. He says, this is what our Canadian prisons are like, right?
Outside the humiliation and disgrace, it wasn't bad, because I had a pretty good time down there at Millhaven. I had my own room. It was a high-class motel as far as I was concerned.
You weren't getting tenderloin 3 times a week, come on.
You think I wasn't, eh?
No.
Well, you just keep on thinking, baby, because you're not right.
While he was in Millhaven, Billy, his son, who was a young lawyer who had articled at our firm for a while, had taken over the entire operations, ran it without any hitches or any big problems. And then Harold came back, and instead of patting him on the back and saying, son, you got a great future when I'm gone running this organization, said, get out of here, I'm back in charge, so bugger off. I mean, it was that blunt. I couldn't believe it. And there was always that ill feeling between father and son as a result.
You're unrepentant, totally unrepentant.
Absolutely. And as far as old Diefenbaker goes, he got up in the house and said there's a law for the rich and one for the poor. I got the tape on that. That old sucker would steal your eyes out and put a grape in until you look better.
God damn, how are you?
Ballard was out of prison after only a year, and his first order of business was to foolishly ignore the World Hockey Association.
The WHA. What good can they do for us? I mean, to say we don't need them, they need us.
And for Leaf fans, turning his back on the greatest Leaf of all time was the deepest cut of all.
He was a guy that won the Conn Smythe, he's greatest Leaf ever. Yet he was kind of blown out of town, so to speak, with Harold and, the WHA and a number of other guys that left because Harold didn't want to acknowledge that there was another league there. And rather than do what was right to build the hockey club, he let a number of guys go, and Keon was one of them.
And the WHA came and took many of their best young players. And then Dave Keon, who had never been a Ballard fan going back to the 60s, left in 75, and then that deteriorated into what went on for 20 or 25 years.
And Keon was one of the pillars of the Leaf dynasty, and that was very sad to see him go. But he went to Minnesota for twice as much money.
It was a sad end because I think that David, and rightfully so, deserved more money. He deserved more respect. But at the end of the day, it was time for him to sort of go elsewhere as well because it wasn't going to work with the ownership that was there.
I'll tell you something, Mr. Ballard is my type of guy. I know I'm going against the grain saying this. I've always liked him, and he says what he thinks, and he's good for hockey.
He didn't like the idea of giving money to players. I don't know what he was thinking of, but he could see the other teams were doing it. He didn't think the guy was worth so much money he wouldn't pay him, and that's why he lost them all.
Yeah, it decimated the whole franchise because they had nothing to work with, nothing to offer other teams to bring in players that could help them win. We would have won 4 or 5 Stanley Cups in the mid 70s. For sure, we would have had as good a team as Montreal had, no problem.
It soured so many players on thinking they were a part of this Maple Leaf team and tradition that should have been way stronger at that time. But I think Harold underestimated the World Hockey Association's power.
He decided that the WHA wasn't going to last and he wasn't going to pay the blood money. That was his position, and it hurt the team.
Ballard had a talent for making money, but he refused to spend it on anything.
You combine his cheapness, which showed up in kind of significant hockey ways, but also in kind of penny ante ways. He nickeled and dimed like crazy. But remember, there's no salary cap in that era, right? There's no salary cap at all. And the Toronto Maple Leafs drove more revenue by some multiple than any other team in the National Hockey League other than the New York Rangers. They had an enormous financial advantage up until the cap. All through the 80s when they were terrible, they still had that enormous financial advantage over everybody else in the NHL. There's no reason why they couldn't have spent money where you could spend money.
He wanted to keep things on the cheap and make sure that there was plenty of money for himself and the company.
You must have 15 scouts.
Most people around the league say Leafs don't have enough.
Well, that's all right. Who's got more?
Calgary, Edmonton.
What have they done?
They're in first place.
That's all right. Well, they can stay in first place. Some of their scouts I wouldn't want.
A typical hockey office would have 20 times the number of people of that today, or 15 times the number of people of that today. So people would always come up and say, you're like smaller than some junior A operations. Well, that's kind of Mr. Ballard ran lean, to say the least.
The reason he felt that he could sell programs was because there was no name on the back of the sweater. And he refused to have a name on the back of Leaf sweaters because he claimed to the league that would hurt program sales. So when the league mandated that all teams, he made sure that the lettering would be there, but it would be the same color as the jersey. So you'd never see it. Harold believed you have to pay $250 to buy that program to make it all work for him.
Guy Kinnear, he had Guy Kinnear as his boat mechanic became the trainer of the team because he liked them. Yeah, he used to give guys Neocitrin. Like a player would come in with some kind of a nagging injury or something, and he would give them a Neocitrin. Because he was a boat mechanic, right? He didn't know he was Ballard's boat mechanic up at his cottage, and he liked him. So he made him the trainer. He gave him the gig as he became the trainer of the Toronto Maple Leafs. He had zero medical knowledge, none. And he became the trainer because Harold wanted to look after his guy.
His wife gone, his prison sentence behind him, he made the peculiar decision to move into an apartment inside Maple Leaf Gardens. Along with his unconventional new living quarters came an unexpected new friend, legendary Maple Leaf, King Clancy.
So now you've got him without his wife. King becomes the sidekick. He moves to Maple Leaf Gardens, lives there all the time.
His wife had passed, and in I think a seemingly sentimental way, just said, I'm going to move lock, stock, and barrel, and I'm going to go 1,000 miles an hour running the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Like he lived at the Gardens. He lived, ate, and slept with the Leafs in the Gardens. Once he took it over, he moved from Montgomery Road out in the West End right into the Gardens and never left.
He literally was there all the time. Yeah, he lived in his apartment. He was either in his apartment or in his little bunker watching the game or somewhere within walking the halls of that building.
Well, no light. Had one window that gave some natural light, but other than that, dark. Certainly not a comfortable place from my point of view, but he seemed to like it. He didn't have far to go after work.
Like, can you imagine owning a sports franchise and you live in it?
Harold would get up, go down to the hot stove and grab a bowl of ice cream in the middle of the only one in the building. Or I can go up and play the organ in my house. And his house is Maple Leaf Gardens. Or I'm sitting in the Reds eating a bowl of cereal To me, as a hockey person, I think that'd be awesome. This is my house, and that was basically how we treated it.
And because he lived there, he was the security guard. He was the night watchman. He could appear at any point in time, anywhere in the building.
You know, it's funny, he had about 4 different exits or entrances, so you never really knew where he was.
I never had a brother or sisters. And consequently, I had to latch on to somebody. And thank God I latched on to King.
That he had to be special to put up with you?
Well, I would say that's probably the reason that I thought so much of him, because you know what kind of son of a bitch I am. And it takes a pretty good person to put up with me.
King Clancy was beloved by players and fans alike, but his role with the Leafs wasn't well defined. Public relations, interim coach, team mascot, he did it all. But Clancy's main responsibility was to be Harold Ballard's best friend.
King was a delightful guy. Distracted Harold. He was kind of, you know, to me, he was more like the, you know, court jester kind of guy, right? That kept Harold occupied so that he did cut off more people's heads. And it kind of distracted him, made him smile, right? That's kind of, I always thought that was kind of King's role.
You know, a lot of people say Mr. Ballard is tough, Mr. Ballard is this, Mr. Ballard is that. Mr. Ballard, to my way of thinking, is one of the greatest people that I ever met. He's a class individual. He says things at times that it just comes out.
We look like a couple of goddamn missionaries, don't we?
Both of them had lost their wives, so they really didn't have any responsibilities to anybody.
So he replaced his wife with King Clancy, and the two of them, they were just like brothers who were born at the hip.
Ballard had his problems for a good part of the 70s, but in 1977, seemingly out of nowhere, the best Leaf team in a decade emerged. That unexpectedly remarkable club featured 2 of the top goal scorers in the NHL, a couple of blue liners who could stack up against anyone, a hotshot kid in goal, Dave Tiger Williams, and an innovative coach nicknamed Captain Video behind the bench.
He's a very intelligent fella as far as hockey goes. As a matter of fact, he's an intelligent fella, period. He's a school teacher, and he's a great man for detail, and he's a great man for discipline. And I think he's a great man for everything that a young fella needs today, and that's the reason I hired him.
They had a really good thing going in the late 70s. The Leafs were a contender against the Islanders when they beat the Islanders out.
Turnbull clears it ahead to McDonald. McDonald, and he scores! McDonald wins it! Lanny McDonald and the Leafs win it 2-1 in a goal by Lanny McDonald.
The greatest moment in Leaf history, really, over the last, probably going back to 1967.
Unbelievable series, but our team was so beat up, lost to Montreal in 4 straight, and we still were close in those games.
They should have beat Montreal, but Borja got hurt. And once he was done, they were pretty well cooked.
Now, when they beat out the Islanders, they were only about a player away from Stanley Cup. They were a good club.
We knew we were on the right track.
And yet within 365 days of that, it had all fallen apart.
That team could have gone the distance, and then the next year, of course, everything was broken up.
And then I think things went south from there.
They just let everybody go, and they got nothing.
I'm not paying that guy that money. I'm not paying. And the WHA was paying him. That's when they lost the club.
The following season, the decimated team struggled.
We're not improving the way I thought we would.
And Ballard knew exactly who to blame for the team's woes. The coach.
Roger Nielsen, quality man, quality coach. We love playing for the guy, had us prepared.
Nielsen was a very different man from Harold Ballard. He was an intellectual. He read books with no pictures. He had interests outside hockey. He tried to bring the 1970s to Maple Leaf Gardens, which had a fence around it, concealing the 1930s within.
And his nickname was Captain Video because, at least for the Leafs purposes, he was using video to show players, here's where you broke down, here's where you did a great job. This was all very new to the Toronto Maple Leafs. So I think, you know, there was some hope at that point, the late 70s, that maybe, we are going to go into, you know, the next century trying to move ahead of the game a little bit.
The team the year before had gone to the semifinals and knocked off the Islanders. And then the next year, they were struggling to be a 500 team. So he was anticipating them to get better. Instead of getting better, they were hanging on and hanging on. The style that Roger played was always a defensive style, and it was boring. And A lot of the people in the media would influence Harold Ballard's thinking. Is this it? You know, are you going to get rid of him now? And whether Ballard says, yeah, he's as good as gone. You know, I could just see him saying, you know, yeah, he's as good as gone, or yeah, well, there'll be somebody else behind the bench on Saturday night. And that's all he needed. He just needed somebody to fuel, to spark the match.
He's one of the best coaches in the National Hockey League, Captain Video. He works at it night and day, but I don't like his style. You gotta put on a show. The game is entertainment. And he plays that defensive hockey, although they're not doing so well this year, and it's deadly dull.
Right up to game time, it wasn't clear who would replace Roger Neilson, the man fired yesterday as coach of the Maple Leafs.
Now we're out of a coach, so I ran practices along with Lanny and Tiger for a few days while they're scrambling around, and again, the media is making a circus of this. A number of us went to Jim Gregory and said, listen, the best guy for the job for the rest of the season for sure is Roger Neilson.
The players begged him not to let him go. And then he says, why don't you come back Saturday and we'll put a paper bag over your head and then we'll unveil it after the warm-ups.
So he wanted Roger to wear this bag. I remember getting ready to go out on the ice. The media didn't know. They were going to just go behind the bench when the national anthem started, and there's the coach, Roger Neilson, back. And I remember standing inside the dressing room waiting for the signal to go out for the start of the game, and Ballard's there with a bag. Yeah, put it on, put it on. And Roger's kind of sheepish looking, and we're kind of there. Just for real, you know? Wear the friggin' bag and stand to the national anthem, then pop it up.
And I remember standing out there because I was near the dressing room area, and it was just so crowded, you know, media and whatever, just waiting to see Roger come out. But that was insane.
They were talking about sending me out first. And I was mortified. Like it was almost like a clown act to send him out with a bag over his head. Come on. You don't do those things.
Here comes Roger Neilson. And the crowd is aware of it now. The crowd did not know that Roger Neilson would be back on the bench until this very moment. And they are standing. Have you ever seen anything like this in all the years of hockey? This is like a soap opera here.
The same fans who've been demanding my scalp all of a sudden were the other way and cheering me like we'd just won the Stanley Cup, so it was quite a thing.
It was really embarrassing, but again, to Harold, that was the great show. I can do something, and then everybody's going to be talking about me, and I'm going to be sitting in that little box in the corner of the Gardens with a big smile on my face and laughing my butt off.
Those guys don't know anything about promotion or anything like that anyway. If he didn't want to made it'd been a lot of fun. Life's not so serious as all that. You can't make a few fun things out of it.
It was obviously destructive, and it was obviously cruel, and it was obviously done on a whim. It wasn't like there was a plan. There wasn't a plan ever. He just did whatever the hell he felt like. It's a toy, right?
Roger Neilson back on the Leaf bench once again. Leaf owner Harold Ballard said he hadn't really fired Neilson. He just wanted to shake up the team, which had been in a slump.
Now listen, who told you that I interfered with the team?
Anyone knows
No, never interfered with a team in my life.
You've never interfered in the
Never interfered. Never gone in the dressing room, except once when I had the trouble with Neilson. I went in then and straightened the guys out for 5 games, then they went back in the same old lullaby.
After being swept in the playoffs by Montreal for the second straight year, Roger Neilson is fired, along with highly respected hockey man Jim Gregory, the Leafs general manager.
Jim Gregory was a great hockey man and a great person, and Harold was fortunate, in my mind, to have a guy like that running it. Now, if you just let him do that and do his things and give him the authority to spend the money that you might have to spend to keep an extra player rather than, cut into it, we probably would have had more success.
He had the best hockey mind going in Jim Gregory. He had the most underrated Maple Leaf general manager, executive, as beloved a guy as there would be in the National Hockey League in him.
Jim Gregory started working there when he was 21 years old, and Harold Ballard saw him as a kid.
That's the worst thing I ever saw him do when he fired Jim Gregory. We were on our way, but somehow or other, he got enamored with Imlach and brought him in.
After cleaning house, Ballard tried to resurrect the Leafs' glory days by bringing back the man who coached them to 4 Stanley Cups in the 60s. George "Punch" Imlach was named the new general manager.
Mr. Ballard knows me, and as I pointed out to him, my success in the hockey business with the Maple Leafs and with Buffalo was that I ran the show. So if you want me to have the same success, then I have to run it. Certainly there's no sense of paying me a lot of money and not letting me do the job that I'm supposed to be able to do.
Harold got involved, brought Punch back, and then everything just went to shit after that.
Harold went for the bright lights of Punch. Punch convinced him on a quick fix.
Just when things started to get good, Harold would step in and do something stupid and turn it upside down.
So you're telling us right here and now that Imlach will run the hockey team without any interference at all from you?
We won't have any interference as far as I'm concerned. We will have talks and suggestions to one another, but that's not interference. It's a business deal. Punch is smart enough and knows enough about hockey, but he's not going to try and take it all on himself.
Imlach's hired. It's September. I get a call from the secretary at Maple Leaf Gardens that Mr. Imlach would like to see in his office. And I walk into Punch's office, and this is the first time I met him now, right? And this is kind of how the meeting went. You go in, and there's a board table there, and I'm sitting at one end, and he's standing up. And he goes, "Just who do you think you are?" And then he said to me, he says, "My captains have always been management, and they do what management says." And I said, "Well, I believe a captain is a go-between between management. We're all in this together to work to achieve the same common goals and all that sort of stuff." And then the next thing he said, and Alan Eagleson, he says, he's your player agent. He said, you know, when Eagleson says it's black, he says, I say it's white. And he says, you're going to be stuck in the middle. There's no gray area here. So I would suggest you might want to look at getting another agent. And he says, furthermore, you've got a no-trade contract. And I don't believe in no-trade contracts. And I'm going to test you in court.
Some people raise the question about whether or not you have lost track of the new generation, that you don't relate to them as well as you did to the players in the 50s and 60s.
It can't be 20 people doing it their way. It's got to be a team way of doing it, and the coach and the managers, they call which way that's got to be done. And the player has to adjust himself to the team, not the team or the rest of the players adjusting to the ways one certain person plays. You never win that way. That's just a fallacy, and I think you could.
I think it was clear that Punch Imlach in 1979 did not understand the young hockey player of 1979. I don't think that's my brilliant observation. I think the game had passed him by.
I'm sure he saw me as a bit of a threat, popular guy, a little bit of a power, and that he wanted to bring his own players in and make his own team so that it was Punch's team.
Punch did things to upset the guys. He would have us come down for 2 practices. You'd come very first thing in the morning, in rush hour, and then you'd have to stay downtown till a late afternoon practice so he could send you home in rush hour. And it was just to tick the guys off.
He was just a bad person. He was just that snake that lived in the sewer hole.
It was a circus where it didn't need to be a circus. He was a ringmaster, he was a carnival barker, but the tent was already full. All he needed to do was hire competent people and let them run the hockey club. But he couldn't do that.
Selected 8th overall in the 1970 NHL draft, Sittler was the face of the team. Despite his popularity, or because of it, Sittler's relationship with Imlach was rocky, which meant his relationship with Ballard was rocky.
I think, honestly, he respected me as a person. He said that publicly a number of times. I was a hardworking guy, a loyal employee, a dedicated Maple Leaf.
I think Darryl, when he came here from London as a first-round pick, he did everything he possibly could to carry the Leaf colors. Once he was named captain, he took it up to the next level, that he was the team spokesman, and it was his job. So he weathered the storm constantly in the media. He was always up front, always talking to reporters, regardless of what was going on behind the scenes, and he rarely let it out.
Everybody really worked hard tonight, really gave it everything they had, and we finally beat the Flyers. It's good to see, but that's only one game. They make it a 7-game series that you have to win 4, so there's 3 more tough ones yet.
You're the captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs. In 1976, you have a 10-point night, you have a 5-goal playoff game, you score the winning goal in the Canada Cup. I mean, he's a hero.
The tension between Sittler and Imlach exploded. Imlach wanted to show the world who was boss, so he convinced Ballard to do the unthinkable.
I get a call from Ballard and said, Sittler go to Philly. And I said, Harold, we've got a deal. and you signed it, so it's no trade, and he's not going anywhere.
Lanny McDonald is exceptional, I would say.
2 days later, they trade Lanny McDonald. Darryl and I acted for Lanny too, figured was a way to teach me and Darryl that he'll get me some way or the other, or get Darryl.
Friends in Toronto would phone up and say, "Oh my gosh, thank goodness you got traded. You're out of the madhouse." But that first moment when you get traded, it's devastating.
I felt things were deteriorating in Toronto. I didn't feel that what they were doing to the hockey club was helping them. I felt they were tearing down the players, and anytime you start tearing down the players, you're tearing the heart and soul out of your hockey club. It's not as if I'm just talking about sour grapes, but the fans are very dissatisfied, and I can't blame them, because that is a hockey dynasty, and if that goes downhill, the whole league's hurting.
It was completely out of spite. That was Punch when he came back from Buffalo, basically letting everyone know that he was in charge. And the best way that he was going to show the world that he was in charge, well, it was going to break up the best friends, Lanny and Darryl. So if you can't move Darryl, then you piss off Darryl by trading Lanny.
That was the great line by Frank Orr in the Toronto Star, that Sittler was caught between the devil and the deep blue sea, the deep blue letter C on his chest, where they couldn't work for this man anymore. Sittler understood how to succeed in the National Hockey League. He understood what it took and the sacrifice and the work that all of them did to get to be one of the Toronto Maple Leafs. And then to see that C and that leaf become an object of ridicule, that's got to be not only demoralizing, it's got to be very destabilizing. To think, I wanted so badly, I dreamed so hard to wear this sweater, and now it's a joke.
And what happened there was I'd gone through all these months of this crap that was going on behind the scenes. And I remember specifically saying to myself as I'm driving home the morning of the morning skate, it's a Saturday morning and Lanny had been traded. Why am I here? I'm here to play hockey. That's my job. Punch doesn't respect me, there's no communication as a captain. So I'm just going to remove the captain and go do my job. I'm going to show you, I'm going to show that, I use this terminology, that fat guy upstairs and the rest of Canada, that I'm a hockey player, I'm going to play hockey. That's what I'm paid to do. Went back on the ice and played.
I love him, I respect him, and that was his decision, so I back him completely.
Darryl did everything, in spite of Punch making life miserable for him, up until the trade of Lanny. Darryl's position was impeccable, and then nobody had any complaints whatsoever. The only thing that hurt him with the public was when he took off the C. But I don't blame him for it. I commend him for it.
Oh, yeah. Harold, he was a vindictive guy. You crossed him, you paid the price, and Sittler paid the price.
Harold Ballard was a man of convictions, and not just the legal kind. His blind faith in Punch Imlach cost him dearly, and his refusal to pay players what they were worth compounded an already terrible situation. By 1982, Darryl Sittler's fate was sealed, but he was the last to know it.
I was making, I don't know, maybe 160, 170 grand a year, whatever it was, and other guys were making 250, right? So I went to Mr. Ballard and I said, listen, things have changed somewhat. Would you consider moving forward, signing me to a new contract and kind of bringing my status up with these other guys? And I remember him saying to me, Darryl, leave it with me. I'd like to do whatever I can, right? The secretary calls and she says, Mr. Ballard wants to talk to you. Darryl, he says, I've decided what we're going to do. We'll trade you to any city you want to go to. Come and see me, like that.
Yeah, I traded him. And it was the tough thing to do. But Darryl wanted another contract, and Mr. Ballard wouldn't give it to him. He wanted to play out the contract that he had. And that's what started the brouhaha, and that's why Darryl came and asked for a trade.
And then for the grapevine, so to speak, that Harold saying, we're not trading him, we're keeping him, we're just just to get them motivated a little bit or something to that effect, which fueled me more, right? Like, okay, if you say you're going to trade me and we're going to do a deal, then don't play these games, right?
Darryl was, starting to get up in age. He was still a good player, but to try to get equal value when you have to trade somebody and you have a certain amount of clubs to trade, you can't trade to everybody because you won't go. He's got no trade clause.
Because of my no trade contracts, I gave them 5 teams that they could, have the opportunity to negotiate with. One was Buffalo, Minnesota, Philadelphia, or whatever, right? And then they finally came to a deal with Philadelphia. And that's how I left town.
My sense was always that the chaos that Harold inspired, incited, created, led to just a whirlwind of happenstance and things going wrong and people blaming other people. To me, the promise of the 70s ended with Sittler's trade to Philadelphia in January of '82.
Darryl was the one guy that, from start to finish, should have worn the Maple Leaf jersey forever and never gone anywhere.
They were on the verge of being very, very good. They should have been a contender and a playoff team for a long time. And instead, he attacked the foundation players. He singled guys out. He humiliated them. And to what end? Like, there's no hockey argument for what he did. There's absolutely no hockey argument. And I don't think there's any marketing argument for what he did. There's not any argument for what he did, aside from it was kind of, cruelty, right? Like, that it was just kind of done out of cruelty and spite.
Harold didn't care about winning necessarily. He said he wanted to win, but he cared more about the fact that he was not the star of that team. It was Roger Nielsen. It was Darryl Sittler. It was Mike Plump. It was like the players and the team became above him, and he didn't like that one bit.
Rick Vaive came to Toronto in 1980 as part of the trade that saw fan favorite Tiger Williams go to Vancouver. Vaive became the first Leaf to score 50 goals in a season, a feat he achieved in 3 consecutive years. Logic suggested that Vaive deserved a raise, but logic and Harold Ballard's wallet were at odds.
Ricky had just scored 50 for the 3rd time, and in one of the papers, it said Vaive scores 50 for the 3rd year or something like that, and his contract was up. And underneath it, it said, looks like Ballard's gonna have to loosen his purse strings. He turned to Ricky, who was right here. My chin was basically on Rick's shoulder, so, Harold was right here, and he says, if you think you're getting another effing dime out of me, you're crazy, and sits down. And he was dead serious. So as a young guy, I'm like, oof, this is the owner talking to the captain, and it's like, wow, that stuff's real.
I don't think he gave a shit about the team. I honestly don't. I think all he cared about was having people in the seats and making money. And I don't think he cared if we won a Stanley Cup or not. I honestly don't.
I really feel sorry for the players. I know they come to the rink and they work as hard as they can, but you can't get that extra work out of yourself unless you know you're going to get some respect for the job that you do. So you got to have it. And if that's not going to be there, this team is never going to get any better.
Dan Maloney was kind of, he started out a little bit rough as a coach, but he was coming around, and we had a couple of good years under him. And then he wanted a 2-year contract. Harold wouldn't give him any more than 1, so he left and went to Winnipeg. So, we lost the one guy that was kind of sort of starting to get it and what it took talking to the players and communicating. And then all of a sudden he's gone. It was one thing after another. It was like nonstop nonsense, by Harold.
It was always hard to countenance that because Maple Leaf Gardens was such a juggernaut financially. It was in the 60s when he was part of the Silver Seven. It was in the 70s when he became the sole owner. And it certainly was through the 80s when there wasn't a seat to be had at Maple Leaf Gardens and the TV contracts for the time were very lucrative. And yet he didn't go out and invest that money back in the team.
Waiting for the Leafs to win at this point in time is like leaving on the porch light for Jimmy Hoffa.
The turmoil of the 80s made the Stanley Cup of 1967 seem like ancient history. But Ballard carried on. confident and cocky, more worried about the bottom line than the blue line.
The Leafs of the 80s were a woe-begotten group.
It was pretty crazy. I mean, over those years, like, we drafted some pretty good players, but Harold, he ran it. First of all, he wouldn't pay anybody good money. He wouldn't pay for a good general manager that could make good decisions. So those players that we drafted that were good hockey players, they were forced into action at 18 years old when most of them weren't physically or mentally ready to play in the National Hockey League.
As a young person, you go, well, you know, it's not so secure here. You want to have the feeling of security in your job. You know, you don't want people to be afraid for their job if they make one mistake. Like, you know, people should be allowed to make mistakes and they should be allowed to grow. And that was never given to any teams in the 80s.
And being a rookie at 18 in the NHL, you're just so happy to be there. And half our team was 20 and under at that stage. And the other half team, you know, the Ricky Vives and Boris Salmings, they would understand it. They were 10 years in the league, 15 years in the league, and lived it. So they're going, oh, here we go again. We're us first-year guys, we're like, this is awesome, we're playing in the NHL. And I was 18 years old, I was just happy to be there.
So many talented people that could have got that team perennially competitive. Maybe not Stanley Cup every year, but certainly not a laughingstock as they were through the 80s, were cast aside, and it was a mess, and it just became worse and worse and worse.
For the second time in 3 years, the seats at Maple Leaf Gardens will be empty at playoff time.
Right now, the organization just doesn't have it.
Are you disappointed in the Leafs?
Not really.
Why is that?
I didn't have great expectations for them in the first place.
You a hockey fan?
Not really.
You don't follow the Leafs at all?
Not this year, anyway.
Why is that?
Well, they're at the bottom, aren't they?
Going through those years was very difficult because losing really gets to you after a while. And it almost becomes a job. And it was a job, obviously, and I got paid pretty good to do it. But, you know, at the end of the day, you got to have fun, too. I mean, when you go to work, you want to have fun, and you want to enjoy it. And obviously, we weren't having a whole lot of fun because we weren't winning.
It's just unfortunate if you come along as a young athlete at that time and you've worked your whole life to be a pro hockey player and you run into this, it makes for a rocky road. You want to learn how to be a pro. You want to see it from, you know, the guys that are ahead of you. But, you know, when things are happening to them like that, how is it that they can pass on their experience?
It got to the point where even the fans were so disgusted with what they were seeing. There was one moment when the fans did something very un-Toronto-like.
Now there's all sorts of debris being thrown onto the ice.
I don't think it was directed at the players so much, but it was just the whole awful mess that the Leafs had become.
We've got a streaker on the ice.
There's no question but that Harold was asked to take blame for that because he was the owner. So he didn't hire the right people, and they didn't draft the right players, and they didn't run the organization so they had a flow through from their minor team up to the big leagues. So there's no question that Harold has to take the hit for that.
I think for a lot of those years, there was always the hope that sanity would prevail. There was always the hope that Harold would bring in someone who was qualified.
He didn't espouse to the business theory that, you know, you need to spend money to make money. To him, it was like, why? Why do I have to do that? The building's full. I've got program sales. I've got this, I got that. Why do I need to go and pay a hockey executive a couple $100,000, then give him all the control? That was the biggest thing. He never gave anybody total autonomy or total control. Everything had to go through him.
How comfortable are you with your image with Toronto hockey fans? A lot of people think you're the problem here.
Well, maybe I am if they want to buy the place that's open for sale. All they have to do is bring money.
Ballard loved chaos and reveled in sparring with the press or anyone who questioned his increasingly inappropriate behavior.
Now, don't start that fucking camera going.
There's a couple of swell-looking broads in here. Holy Christ, you ought to see the one in the front
Talk about a linebacker. Jesus Christ, eh? Because we've been sucking a hind tit long enough, and with a few of these kind of guys coming in, we're don't laugh. God damn it, you can't ignore these kind of things. And we've tried, whether you think we have or not, with the bullshit that you put in the paper, telling us how rotten we've been.
Through his ownership years, he was on the record a lot with comments that were misogynistic, with comments that were homophobic, with comments that were racist. I don't think you can, even though the times were different than they are today, even in those times, he was outrageous for those times.
Get out of here. Boy, give you a good kick in the balls.
If Harold Ballard existed in 2022, he would have been canceled, like very quickly. And essentially, this is someone who's incredibly powerful. Pick what equity-deserving group he decided to offend. Let's just do the bingo. He decided to offend them all at different points and was not apologetic about it.
I don't know if Harold Ballard would have been around very long in a present-day lens. I don't think he would have had enough leeway to have people forgive that and allow him to stay in the role that he did. You say something like some of the things Harold Ballard said back then, you're out of here.
He was abusive to his players, he was abusive to his general managers and his coaches, and he had this platform that really went unchallenged. And he had an incredible interview with CBC and Barbara Frum.
Hi, Mr. Ballard.
How are you?
How are you?
Well, I'm all right.
You won a hockey game.
Well, 1-2. What's the matter with your addition? Why don't you get somebody on there who can handle this job, Dick? Females on the radio, they're a joke. They're a joke, are they, Harold? You know where they're at their best, don't you? You know they're That's pretty. That's where they should stay. Well, okay. Let them up once in a while. You give them their shoes once in a while.
Mr. Ballard.
Would you keep quiet?
No, this is still my show.
Well, if it is,
I have another question for you.
Good. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to Dick. So when you learn to mind your own business and let me talk to Dick, it'll be fine. Goodbye.
He basically tells her to shut up on her own show. This was him.
You're renowned for the outrageous things you say about women, about racial groups. Why do you say things like that?
Well, that's the way I think. And as I said before, I tell people what I think. I don't think one way and then tell somebody else another way.
And to follow that up, there was a CBC Fifth Estate story done on him in 1980. And they had mics hanging around him when he was using the N-words around athletes or about athletes, you know?
Who is it? Kelly, an Irishman. You can't
He's all right. And he's a hell of a player, too. See you.
No. Is he? No, white. You don't think there'd be any called Kelly, do you?
There's also them.
No, King, surely not.
This was not all for show. I believe that's the man talking like that. That's what he was all about.
Although it's not tolerated in today's times, I think he's grown up with people where it was a familiar comment and a familiar description, and I don't think anybody's going to change him now. And if he offends people, he just says, I don't care, I don't give a damn, that's the way I feel, and that's the way I think, and that's the way I talk. If they don't like it, they don't have to do business with me.
Does it occur to you that they might be deeply offended by you referring to them that
I
way?
don't think so. You want to get offended at that? It's stupid.
You couldn't get through a two-sentence conversation with Harold without it being full of invective and obscenity.
The first time a female reporter was allowed in the Leaf room, and he'd been fighting that with the league for a little while. He didn't want any females in reporters in the room. So after the game, the guys are gearing down, and she's standing over here, and Harold walks in, and he sees her, and it was kind of a calculated move. As soon as he's walking past her, he turns to the room, and he yells out, "Look out, boys, we got a lizard watcher in here," and keeps walking. And it was like, oh.
Rosie DiMano or Christy Blatchford, they weren't hockey fans. They were just in there doing the job. They had to go down and get some interviews, and to get the interviews, they had to go into the dressing room, and Harold said, he didn't want to let them in there.
They come in there, get players half-dressed, want to bring a broad in, that's the worst thing. If the broad comes in naked, I'm going to tell you, it takes her a lot longer to get out than it does to get in, and I told her those were the conditions. Take your clothes off and go on in. Because we got guys there with cocks as long as your arm.
We got to do some bleeping here, guys. Can't use that, Harold.
Why? What's the matter with it?
Harold,
I'm telling the truth. Maybe it'll give them a little more ass somewhere.
I laughed out loud then, but today, there's no chance anybody would air that clip or even use it as a quote.
They couldn't even put the stuff on TV that he was saying to take it back to your producer and say, well, you want to run this? No, I don't think so.
It's never been a correct stance to have, obviously. And it comes with being entitled, it comes with being insecure, and it comes with, being challenged by someone who you feel shouldn't have the right voice to challenge you.
I think to a certain extent, Ballard was smarter than the media because he ultimately could play the long game. He knew that he was going to be in that position of power for years, for generations. So that pressure, I think, caused a lot of people to go along with Harold instead of pushing up against him.
Harold had decided this is the time to make a stand against women in the locker room. And so I remember the sports editors in Toronto and the hockey writers' leadership got together, a little restaurant down on King Street the night before the game, and we decided that we were going to take Harold on. And the only way to take Harold on was first of all, by surprise, and then two, by a show of force. And so we agreed that the next night we would all descend on Maple Leaf Gardens.
Last night, the Toronto chapter of the Professional Hockey Writers Association stormed the inner dressing room to show their displeasure over what they considered an unprofessional working environment.
As soon as the game ends or leading up to the end of the game, more people troop out of the press box at Maple Leaf Gardens than I've ever seen, head down to the dressing room, and 10 minutes after the game ends, the door is supposed to be open, so whoever was the head of the line just opens the door, and we walk in. And it was a very tight and cramped Leaf dressing room in those days, but there's probably 35 of us strong, including women, that just walk into the dressing room. Well, Harold is in there. Harold hasn't come out of the dressing room yet.
He was standing there with his cane and waving it.
Get out of here, get the fuck out of here, get out, fuck! And that will remain one of my enduring images of Harold. I mean, just ranting and raving with his cane and waving it at everybody.
If I'd have been sensible, I should have got one of the hockey sticks and decapitated the bastards.
Now, as the letter says, in light of last night's march, the entire Leaf dressing room is off limits to all female and male reporters.
Harold, the media in Toronto, are they too tough on your hockey club these days?
Oh, no, they're a bunch of jerks. Who worries about what they... Especially that Globe and Mail bunch, they should be writing kids' books or comics or something like that.
You're still after the guys from the Globe?
Why not? Why not? They're, you say when you talk about halfwits, you have to talk about them.
Ballard never held back his tongue for anyone or anything. But at that point in his life, the one constant he had that kept him somewhat even-keeled was King. King passed away November 10th, 1986.
I don't think there's anybody that knew King that won't think about him daily or when his hockey game on, because there were so many facets of things that he did, not only hockey, but other things. And I never realized how much of a loss that's going to be to the building. I don't think he will ever get the thing straightened out.
Harold was okay when King Clancy was alive, and then when King passed away, he started to go downhill pretty quickly, and I think he was senile before anybody believed he was, to be honest with you.
I think that was his last real tie to hockey, because King Clancy was a lifer as far as hockey player, referee, coach. He did it all in the game, and he'd drive in every morning, have breakfast with Harold in the hot stove, and when King passed, I think that was the last real connection to hockey in his era of somebody he really trusted.
They sat in that Muppet box there together until the day they both couldn't do it. I think it was a movie, those two guys, as far as I'm concerned. I love King. I mean, I named my daughter after King.
He was a lonelier figure because King humanized Harold. King had a sense of humor and got along with everybody. And so if Harold and he hung out and he and Harold were friends, you thought, well, maybe there is another side to Harold. I've never seen it, but maybe there is another side.
Ballard indeed had many different sides to his persona. But for all his bravado, bluster, and brouhaha, something rarely talked about was his philanthropy.
His Ontario game for physically disabled.
For physically disabled. He was involved in swimming, and he won 3 gold medals.
Is that so?
Isn't that super?
Well, that's fine.
Ballard never tried to hide his animosity toward the media. What he did try to keep secret was the amount of money he gave to charity.
Harold would donate $25,000, $50,000 at a time, and that was a lot of money back then, to Special Olympics, on one condition, that no one could ever find out where that money came from. And we begged Harold, like, you need to let us tell this story. And he said, nope, they'll think I've gone soft. But the money kept coming to Special Olympics.
I think he cared about charity. I remember it around Christmas time, he would call down to the vaults, and that's where the money was kept. And they would bring up like $50,000 in cash, and you could see him back there doling it out into different envelopes.
Well, a gentleman who's been a big, big help to Big Brothers, Mr. Harold Ballard.
He did a lot of things for charity that nobody knows about. He didn't want anybody to think he was a good guy. Don't ask me why.
This is unbelievable.
I remember when the junior club was over there and they had the big brawl and the punch out of Priestley, I think they call it. He'd give them all gold medals.
To show his support for what had happened, we were all upset, angry at the time, but it was Harold Ballard, owner of the Maple Leafs, would make a gesture of that kind of a magnitude to this kid.
Husky Wee-Wee! Husky Mama! Tigers!
After failed attempts to launch a new CFL franchise in the early 70s, Ballard bought the struggling Hamilton Tiger Cats on the cheap for $1.2 million in 1978. During the 80s, they became his most successful sports franchise. The team made the Grey Cup in 1980, 84, and 85, before finally winning it all in 1986.
Hamilton loves its football team and even loves Harold Ballard, the man everybody loves to hate.
When he won in 1986 with the Grey Cup was also one of the saddest times I've seen Harold Ballard, because King Clancy died, so his sidekick is gone. So at the end of the game, he was there by himself. He's finally won a championship, and he can't share it with anybody. There's nobody there. You could tell he was on the decline health-wise. He was walking very slowly. He was having trouble with his feet. And I took him downstairs, and then I watched him in the media conference. And I'd seen this man since the early 70s until 1986. And I'm watching him. And I said to myself, this is sad, because Harold Ballard can't be Harold Ballard. He wasn't himself. I mean, he would throw out the odd line, but I think the fact that he was missing King Clancy not being there to see this ultimate championship, and the fact that he'd won something, was probably a total shock to him.
Yes, King Clancy passed away that year, but Ballard wasn't alone. A few years earlier, a mystery woman came into his life from out of the blue, Yolanda McMillan. She showed up unannounced at Maple Leaf Gardens one day and never left.
I remember the first day I saw her. It was Mr. Ballard's birthday, and she was out in the office with a birthday cake. And I remember Stan Bodiak bringing her in to see Mr. Ballard with the birthday cake, and the rest is history.
They were perfectly matched, two peas in a pod, because she was a con and so was he.
I'll tell you how weird it was. She called herself Mrs. Ballard for years. He never married her.
She kept him alive. Yolanda kept him alive. She was more obvious than a $3 bill. Okay, she came in like a bull in the china shop. She targeted him, and he wasn't fooled by it, but she was relentless. And at the end, he needed almost a nursemaid that way. Yolanda did a couple smart things. She bought him the dog, TC Puck. He really loved the dog.
The challenge with our team photo was, didn't matter how anyone looked in the photo, we had to get TC Puck sitting down. You'd sit him on the ice and his balls would get frozen and he'd jump up. And she gave us a towel to put under his hind legs about his third year, and he sat down no problem on the ice, but it's because his balls weren't freezing. So that was her greatest contribution.
Harold treated her harshly quite often. Do this and give me that. Everybody says, oh, she's a gold digger. She did this. And Harold said, what the hell? Whatever I give her, I give her. I don't know what he left her, but I think she became King's replacement, just as King became Stafford's replacement. Harold liked someone beside him all the time, and she was that.
I see Yolanda walk across the street because she lived on Granby Street, just south of the Gardens, and she comes across the street. I said, Yolanda, how's it going? And she goes like that. She's got like 5 diamond rings on with a great big smile on her face.
I found her to be an extremely imposing individual who wanted to run his life. So I felt it was a bad thing in his life for him to be with her. So I think that was something that at the end of the day, she was about Yolanda. Now she cared for him. I think she did care for him. But she also wanted to make sure that when Harold was gone, that she was taken care of.
He probably liked all the confrontation and all the arguing and all that stuff because she never backed down from him. She'd argue with him. She wasn't afraid of him at all. Once she was official in the will, she didn't take any shit off him, I'll tell you that.
So there was a general manager's office at the back. And one time when I went back there was Yolanda, and she just was in her undergarments, and she snuck out of the apartment to use the phone. And I thought, I don't think this will be the GM's office. And then it became a walk-in closet for Yolanda the next week.
She had fun early on. She was a low-rent version of the Kardashians or the Gabor sisters. That's what she kind of was. She needed money. She needed to get in somewhere. The rumor was before she came to the Leafs that she was running a limousine business, but people thought it was an escort business or weren't sure. But she had all kinds of financial problems. You know, that's what made the kids even edgier.
As Yolanda and Ballard got closer, Ballard's children, Bill, Harold Jr., and Mary Elizabeth, grew increasingly concerned about the nature of their relationship.
He lived a life with so many cautionary tales along the way. And at the end, you know, the family relationships were strained with his children, dragged out in the courts. He's got Yolanda changing her name to Ballard legally. And then some accounts say she was also, you know, thieving from him as well. You know, some money was going to her that he didn't know about. And, you know, he was losing control of a lot of things, not just his own health, but maybe the ability to make very good decisions.
Harold Ballard's mental and physical state were both on the decline. In 1988, Ballard suffered a heart attack while vacationing in Florida with Yolanda.
Harold Ballard is resting comfortably here at the Miami Heart Institute, one of the finest facilities for heart attack patients in the U.S.
We have had presidents here, we've had heads of state, we've had a lot of dignitaries and celebrities, and I have to say that Mr. Ballard has created more interest, certainly more phone calls than anyone that I can recall.
He's doing just fine. Just fine. He's up, he's walking around. The doctors are really quite surprised, but I'm not surprised with anything Harold does.
What do you mean by that?
His body is as big a character as he is. He comes through these things.
Back in Toronto, tension continued to grow within the Ballard clan.
A judge has declared him mentally incompetent. So Yolanda Ballard and Ballard's daughter, Mary Elizabeth Flynn, went to court to fight over who should be guardian of Harold Ballard and his multi-million-dollar empire.
Harold needs me, desperately needs me as I need Harold.
They're well looked after. There's none of them eating out of garbage cans. They all have good educations. And what they have left in the grab bag when I go, that's up to them. They'll fight like hell about it. There'll be lawsuits and war and everything else. I don't worry about it. I don't try to make favorites of anybody. I want them to think I'm a miserable old bastard, and that's the way to run it.
She was very manipulative and clever, but could civil heads have prevailed? Could he have called them in and said, you know, let's just give you some money, but instead it turned into a very incredibly acrimonious.
It was a horrible, horrible time behind the scenes, I'm sure, but the displays in public were even worse. The Yolanda story where she ran through the Molson Cup press conference in her bathrobe and curlers with the strip sirloin stuck to her eye, screaming that she'd just been punched in the eye. Those of us, 15, 20 of us that were there, were like looking at each other going, circus is still in town.
Police are investigating an alleged assault upon Ballard's companion, Yolanda, and police have questioned Harold's son, Bill Ballard.
Bill apparently cold-cocked Yolanda, allegedly.
Bill Ballard denied assaulting Yolanda Ballard. When he and Yolanda got into a tussle in Harold Ballard's office last fall, Bill Ballard described Yolanda as being out of control. He also said that when she accused him of trying to assault her, he retorted, "Yolanda, if I ever assaulted you, there wouldn't be enough left to put into a hot dog."
Go on.
What the hell's the matter with you?
It obviously bothers you that people are talking about your personal life, about
It's
your
all
life.
right. If they get a lot of fun out of talking about me, let them go ahead. Have you ever seen me try and stop them?
No, but it bothers you.
Well, have you ever seen me try and stop them?
Well, you say
Why the
things-
hell don't you get some brains then and think for yourself?
You say things that would make you
Get
can't
it.
use
You guys make me sick.
Bill was eventually convicted of assault and fined $500. However, for Harold Ballard, his time was coming to an end.
As far as his condition, it's stable. He's a diabetic, and we have to be concerned.
How are you feeling, Harold?
Not too good.
Harold Ballard passed away on April 11th, 1990.
It was Harold Ballard's last visit to Maple Leaf Gardens. When the doors opened, Ballard's longtime companion, Yolanda Ballard, was given an hour for a private visit.
Yolanda, how are you this morning?
He was very, very tough at times, but he was soft inside too.
He had a lot of character, and he had a lot of will and a lot of drive to do whatever he wanted to do.
In life, he was an outrageous character. In death, he's suddenly become one of Toronto's most generous philanthropists.
The beneficiary of this estate is charity.
That was the announcement from Harold Ballard's lawyer today, and the 3 Ballard children said they were expecting it, and it's okay. They were each millionaires long before their father died.
We can't spend what we have now, so I mean, how much is more? And, you know, personally, I don't need the money. I make a lot of my own. So.
If there is to be a fight over Ballard's will, it will come from his longtime companion, Yolanda, who's to receive $50,000 a year for life or until she marries.
You know, she got something, I think, in the will, but Stavro bought her silence. The rumor was that Steve Stavro gave her $5 million and a pair of golds to never speak again. And she never said a bad word about him.
Personally, originally was to get less. I think it's you know, a fine settlement with you.
Can you see her contesting it?
Bill, I don't ever want to see her again, but B, there's nothing she does that amazes me anymore.
I thought for sure she's going to burn through that money. And you're going to see Yolanda on the front page of the Toronto Sun, you know, with a cup in her hand on a street corner and a cane, you know, saying, Ballard family screwed me out of everything.
Harold Ballard owned one of the most successful franchises in the history of the NHL. But under his stewardship, the Maple Leafs, winners of 13 Stanley Cups, but none since 1967, endured 10 losing seasons in a row from 1979 to 1989.
It's amazing he didn't kill this thing. He couldn't kill it, and expansion couldn't kill it, and, you know, millions of options on television and online and all that stuff still couldn't kill it. It's out there. It's in the genes somewhere still that he, you know, he didn't manage to kill it. But, you know, I just kind of, you wonder, you know, he could have had some of that, right? Like he could have been that guy. He could have been the beloved owner of the Toronto Maple Leafs, you know, who looked after his alumni and, you know, built a strong team and hired a good coach and let him do his job. And, you know, and then miraculously in 1982, they won the Stanley Cup for the first time since 1967 and the streets filled. And he could have been that guy, right? Wouldn't that have been better? You know? Wouldn't that have been better than the story we're telling here?
If the Leafs had won just one Stanley Cup under his ownership, he'd be remembered now as a funny, irascible old scamp.
He ran it like a goddamn circus. It was, I mean, every single day, something in a newspaper of some stupid thing that he said, you know, was front and center. And it wasn't about the hockey team. It was just about Harold. And that was Harold's goal, I believe, was to get on the front page of sports every single day. And he pretty much managed that.
His championship was being the guy, was being the face of the franchise, which is why when, you know, members of the franchise, whether it be famous and beloved captains or really smart coaches, pushed up against him, they were quickly removed from the franchise. So I think no question his motivations were to be front and center at all times.
The last line of the obituary says, Harold Ballard was predeceased by his wife, Dorothy, and his hockey team. And maybe that says it best of all.
Harold was, you know, of a different class. He came by his money a different way. He didn't play by the rules, and he didn't care about the decorum expected of somebody in his position. And I think he was flipping a middle finger to people every day.
I don't think he ever took any Dale Carnegie courses, you know. It's my building, it's the only building in town. If you don't like it, fuck off. That was his idea of PR.
It was his team, he owned it. We don't have to like maybe how he did it, but it was his.
When you look at the pantheon of sports owners through history, who are the greatest ones and who are the poorest ones? And Harold's name, even today, 30 years after his passing, it does get included in that list of the worst owners. It's because of the combination. He wasn't a strong hockey guy, didn't pay and didn't hire strong hockey people, and he wasn't a very nice man as well.
I viewed him probably in the same level as a grandfather. You know, what he wanted from you was very basic. Be willing to die for that crest. And when you're bleeding, it better be blue and white. Doesn't matter what I loved him. I loved him.
I don't think he understood the modern game, especially after the series of 72, when training changes from what the Russians had taught about off-ice training, when strategy in the game changes, when videotape comes in, international players, there's guys who speak Swedish in the dressing room for crying out loud. That's not easy to adapt when you're born in 1903 in a monocultural city. But the people who did adapt won the Stanley Cup. And Harold just sat in his booth with old King Clancy, and they lost, and they lost, and they lost, and they lost. And he's remembered as a loser.
You remind me of the story of the circus owner who goes to a small town and takes a white horse and paints black stripes on it because he said they've never seen a zebra, so this might as well be a zebra to them. You're a con artist.
Yeah, well, that's what they call me.
You don't deny it?
No.
Since the demise of Harold Ballard, the team has had a handful of ups and plenty of downs.
So as a millennial, you've certainly heard about the Harold Ballard curse and how his misgivings and, you know, negative acts maybe haunt the franchise the same way that the curse of the Babe would have been a thing in baseball. I'm hopeful, but sometimes even the best of hopes are tested.
I think they have very smart people running the organization, very different-minded people from a lot of different avenues coming together to help build what they hope is a winning team. I do feel like there is something placed upon this team that has prevented them from succeeding. They've been so good.
But through it all, Leafs fans the world over continue to hope and dream that perhaps this will be the season, finally, that the Toronto Maple Leafs break the Ballard curse.